Long exposure cityscape photography can be a lot of fun, but it can also be a little bit tricky. So in this video, what I'm going to do is show you what I like to use for camera settings when it comes to grabbing those type of shots. Now, I'd planned to do this tutorial from the field last night, but I ran into a few problems. It's Christmas here, and there was piped Christmas music right throughout the city. So instead of risking a copyright strike from YouTube, hearing all that music in the background, I've ended up having to do it from my house. So the first thing I like to do is shoot in RAW. Shooting in RAW lets you change the picture in post-processing. It gives you greater flexibility than JPEGs. Second of all, you're going to need a sturdy tripod and a shutter remote release for your type of camera. I also like to shoot in M mode, which stands for manual, because that lets me have greater control over my shutter and aperture. Also, what I like to do is shoot in a low ISO. I shoot anywhere from 100 to 250, and what that does is it keeps the grain and the noise down. It just saves you from trying to eliminate noise and grain in post-processing. Now, what I like to do also is I shoot anywhere from f8 to f11. The reason for this is because with the particular lens that I'm using, in this case, it's the Nikon 16 to 35 f4 VR lens. So what I found with this lens, it's sharpest at around f8 to f11. So I tend to stick with those apertures. So it's the next morning here, and I'm just doing a little bit of post-processing. So what I'll do is I'll take you through some of the locations I went to and the type of shots I got. My first stop was South Bank, and that's right on the Brisbane River. And what I did was I went to the Wheel of Brisbane, and basically what that is a huge Ferris wheel. So what I wanted to do was capture the Wheel of Brisbane and get some motion as it was spinning around. Now, in my first shot, I set up where the Wheel of Brisbane was in the left-hand side of frame. However, I wasn't really happy with it because I just had too much dead space on the right-hand side. So what I did was I moved over and I wanted a perfect shot looking straight up, dead center of the wheel. So with the shot I ended up getting and that I was happy with, I got it at ISO 100. It was sitting at f11 and I got it at 3 seconds. Now last night I also lucked out because there was fireworks happening over the Brisbane River. So I thought, well, this is a good opportunity to show some long exposure, what I like to do with fireworks. So I chose a position where I had basically nobody in front of me. I was very lucky that I got there early enough, and I set my frame up looking straight across the Brisbane River with the city in the background. With fireworks, I like to use a starting point of f10. I have an ISO of 100, and also I like to switch the camera into bulb mode. Now, bulb mode allows me to use my shutter remote release and open up the shutter for as long as I want. However, there is a little trick to that when it comes to fireworks photography. Just make sure you don't leave the shutter open too long, or otherwise the fireworks tend to blend in and become one big bright mush. So a little rule of thumb with me when it comes to shooting the fireworks is I tend to count 3 large fireworks going off. So as I see the fireworks going up, hold down the remote and then bang, 1, bang, 2, bang, 3. So I ended up getting a couple of semi-decent shots. These ones were of the fireworks just as they started up, and you can see the people looking on from the right of frame there, and I've got my city on the left-hand side of frame. The good thing is I got a bit of light reflection as well from the fireworks in the Brisbane River. And the last shot I ended up getting was the finale. So now, once again, I'm not too happy with this shot because once again, I probably got overexcited and was just holding my shutter remote down. I should have released it earlier because you can see that the fireworks have tended to become one big mush. And that's why I have liked the first fireworks shot better. You can see more distinctly the 3 explosions that I was talking about. The ones on the lower level, then the mid level, and then another explosion at the top. So after the fireworks were over, I packed up my gear and I went to a spot where I just knew there was a large road leading into the city and it's used by a lot of buses. And I thought, well, this is going to be good for long exposure. So with this shot, you can see there's quite a lot of action going on. I've got cars going down on the right-hand side of frame. I've got buses coming down the middle lane, and I've also got buses happening on the far left. And all of those are light streaming straight into the city. Now with this particular shot, I did do a little bit of cheating. It's actually 2 shots blended into 1 because those buses just weren't behaving for me last night. I had buses going intermittently down the left-hand side and then intermittently down the middle, and then I had traffic going up the right-hand side. So I had problems where they just weren't behaving, they weren't going at the same time. So what I did is I ended up blending these two shots together. You can see that I've got one shot here where I've got my motion really happening on the left and the right-hand side of frame, but there's absolutely nothing happening in the middle. So what I did was I ended up using this other shot where there was a lot of light streams and action happening down the middle, and using a layer mask in Photoshop, I ended up putting this shot on top of the other one, and I just basically rubbed out around the outside of the left and right hand side of frame and got the final image that I was happy with. With that shot done, I also thought, well, just over on the other side of the river is the Riverside Expressway. Once again, great lead-in lines going into the city. So what I did was I made my way across the river and I used my Joby tripod, set it up on a large railing overlooking the Riverside Expressway. Now with this shot, you can see the city in the background and you've got your lead-in lines with all the light trails coming from the cars. There was a little slight problem with this shot, however. As a bus would go over the bridge, it would actually shake. So I had to time my shutter remote to get the most steadiest shot I could. So I had to wait where there was no traffic behind me and then fire away. After that shot was done, I looked right behind me and I noticed all these buses were still coming past me on the bridge. So what I did was I moved the Joby tripod over to another railing and I got these kind of cool light trails of the buses as they were passing by me. So with my bit of long exposure fun done, I was heading back to the car, and as I was heading back to the car, I was going past this alleyway and I noticed this one lone cop car sitting there with a couple talking up in the distance. So I thought, well, this isn't really a long exposure shot, but I just loved the composition of it. Once again, the importance of lead-in lines looking down the alleyway, and you can see the glow of the red lamps onto the building onto my right-hand side. But it was just another good example of using lead-in lines for your shot. One little thing I forgot to mention is sometimes even shooting at f8 and f11, it still can't be dark enough to get those long light trails, because you need light trails of anywhere between 10 and say 30 seconds. Even though you're shooting at low ISO and shooting in those apertures that are kind of big, you still might need one of these. Now this is an ND8 filter, and what that does is it takes 3 stops of light off the light coming into your camera. So the lesson here is, don't be afraid to chuck one of these into your camera bag when you're doing long exposure cityscape photography. So that's it guys, that was my bit of fun doing long exposure in the city last night. I hope some of the tips I've shared with you help you out. And you can actually apply these tips to any type of camera realistically. Anything from a Canon, Sony, Olympus, Nikon, they all apply. Thanks very much for watching. Always feel free to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.